If you feel like you're repeating yourself all day, then this video is for you. Because most of the time, kids don't just ignore instructions, they just never fully receive them in a way that was easy to understand and act on. That's not defiance, that's misunderstanding and a behavior problem that we can actually fix. I'm Cindy. I'm a PhD behavior analyst and a parent of two kids with ADHD. So, when I talk about this, I'm speaking from over a decade of clinical experience and from applying this in my own life. Setting expectations is a term that gets passed around a lot in parenting spaces, but most of the time it's recommended after behavior is already happening. Let me know if this sounds familiar. One parent says,
My child is not listening. He refuses to do homework. He won't clean up, and I'm exhausted from arguing.
and then another parent responds,
You just need to set clear expectations, tell him that behavior is just not tolerated, that he needs to show some respect, or just take away his phone. You're the parent, you set the rules.
and this advice is usually well meaning, and parts of it can be helpful, like encouraging parents to set boundaries. But expectations don't work like that. They don't work when they're introduced in the middle of a problem behavior or when they're communicated as broad categories rather than as clear actions. Here's what actually matters from a behavior science perspective. Broad statements don't change behavior until they're translated into something a child can do. In behavior analysis, we use something called the dead man test. If a dead man can do it, then it's not a behavior. A behavior is something that a person says or that a person does. So when you're setting expectations, the child should be able to tell you exactly what to do. If they can't, then the guidance isn't clear enough to follow. For example, be respectful is not a clear instruction. Be respectful is a value. And a value can look very different depending on age, culture, and context. I notice that when adults generally say the kids know the rules, what they usually mean to say is, I never actually taught the steps, but I still expect the child to infer them. I love the phrase from Brene Brown, clear is kind, unclear is unkind, because we often expect children to infer the behavior, remember it later, and execute it under stress. That's a lot to ask, especially for kids. For my children with ADHD, I need to remember that ADHD affects working memory, response inhibition, task initiation. So when instructions are given too early, given from across the room, or bundled into too many steps, what looks like not listening is often cognitive overload. It's not that they refused, they just kind of lost the instruction. On my daughter's second grade of kindergarten, she got in trouble for standing in the lunchroom benches. The teacher reminded her that she was expected to sit, and my daughter said, well, you only told us that yesterday. You didn't say that to us today. Unfortunately for the teacher, my daughter was technically correct, and that was a fun conversation to have later at home. So let me save you the trouble, and I can give you a step by step process that you can start using today of how setting expectations actually looks like in real life. Step number one is identify the expectation. Choose 1 to 3 very specific, observable behaviors. Let me give you a few examples. If you're setting expectations with young kids, you could say something like stand next to me, hold my hand, and use kind words. And I understand kind here is a little bit subjective. I'm putting it in because most kids, especially little ones who are already in school, kind of have an idea and understanding of what that word means. But if your child doesn't, then you want to be even more specific about that. If you're setting expectations with an older kid, you might say something like follow instructions, keep your phone in your bag, and give personal space. If you have a teen, you could say something like be home by 10, keep your phone charged, and leave the location on. Setting expectations can also be used with children who are nonverbal or have higher support needs. In these instances, we want to make sure that we're keeping our language very consistent. We're using visuals to aid in those expectations, incorporating AAC devices or PEX boards if they're available or they make sense for that child, and always allow extra time for processing. Step number two is we're going to ensure attending. An expectation only works if it was actually received. And I want to be clear here, I'm not talking about forcing eye contact. Eye contact can be uncomfortable for some kids, and for others, it's a skill that just hasn't been learned yet. So we don't use eye contact as our measure of attention. Instead, it's important to know what attending looks like for your child and that you share that information with everybody else in that child's support group so that everybody can respect that child's boundary. For some kids, attending might look like turning their body toward you, pausing what they're doing, verbally responding, or just even repeating part of what you're saying. Your job is to notice the behaviors that tell you the instruction actually landed. Once you have attending, then you want to give the expectation clearly, specifically, and right before the behavior needs to happen. Instead of saying, hey, we're leaving soon, hurry up and clean up, let's try, hey, we're leaving soon. I need you to stop playing, put the Legos in the bin, and put on your shoes. Specific, clear, observable, executable behaviors. If possible, have your child repeat the expectations back to you. It's not about compliance, it's just about checking understanding. Same goal, but very different level of support. If they're not able to repeat the instruction back to you, or if they're kind of shutting down, there's no reason to force that verbal response. Step 3 is to support the follow through. If your child gets stuck, approach and restate the specific steps. I often notice that the child gets stuck and then we just throw the expectation out the window and we default back to what we were doing before. We need to remember that not only do expectations need to be taught, the routine of setting and following the expectations needs time to become part of your family's rhythm. You may get some pushback at first, like, this is weird. Why are you telling me these things? Why are you talking like that? Doesn't mean it's not working. It just means that it's new. And the last step is to reinforce when our kids actually follow through with the expectation that we set. When they follow it, acknowledge it and acknowledge it big. Just because you expected it doesn't mean it was easy. Following your instruction may not have been in your child's bingo card for this year, but they did it. If you want that behavior to stick long term, it needs frequent reinforcement at first. We'll talk about how to fade that later because I know that's absolutely on your mind. Once instructions are clear, the next questions parents frequently ask is, well, how do I get them to actually follow through consistently? I want them to want to clean up. Well, that's where motivation comes in. And we'll do several other videos about motivation specifically, but in the next episode, we'll talk about token economies and why reward charts usually fail and how reinforcement is actually meant to work. If this helped you see not listening a little bit differently, tell me in the comments. And if you want behavior tools that actually work, grounded in science, like and subscribe, and I'll see you in the next video.